My name is Frank, and I'm 52 years old. I work in municipal permits for the city. It's a good job, and it keeps me busy. I moved to this neighborhood almost 30 years ago. Back then, it was mostly just young families starting out. We all watched our kids grow up together. Now it's mostly just us, the parents. We have a neighborhood watch now, mostly just to complain about things. It's really just a way to kill time. We've been doing it for years, a small group of us. It was always pretty quiet, nothing ever happened. We mostly just talk about each other's lawns. We just had our monthly meeting at Carol's place. Things seemed normal. Carol even baked her famous lemon bars. We talked about a lot of boring stuff. We talked about a new stop sign down the street. We all agreed it was in a weird spot. We also talked about the new family that moved in 2 doors down. Their house was always so dark at night. They never joined our meetings or said hello. It was strange, but we just wrote it off. It was a normal meeting until just before everyone left. Carol mentioned something odd. She said she saw a delivery truck there a few nights ago. Not just any truck, but a refrigerated one. She said it was late, past midnight. That was a really unusual time for a delivery truck. The truck was parked for a long time. It sat there for about an hour. Then it just drove off into the night. She said it made a lot of noise. No one else saw it at all. It was just one of those weird things. I just figured they had a weird schedule. I didn't think much of it at the time. I ate another lemon bar before heading home. My wife, Janice, was already asleep. My dog, Gus, was sleeping on the couch. I put on the news and then decided to just go to bed. I had a really hard time sleeping that night. That image of the dark house kept replaying in my mind. The image of the refrigerated truck kept coming back. I couldn't stop thinking about it. A quiet but unsettling feeling settled over me. It felt like something was coming. The next day I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was just Carol's imagination. She's always a little dramatic anyway. I kept telling myself everything was fine. I went to work and tried to focus. It wasn't working at all. I kept seeing that dark house in my mind. The refrigerated truck just felt so wrong. It was like a splinter in my mind. I called my wife Janice on my lunch break. I told her what Carol had said last night. Janice just laughed it off completely. She said it was probably just a catering truck. They must have a weird schedule. I tried to agree with her. It made a lot of sense after all. A catering truck for a late night party. It sounded so much more normal. She just told me to forget about it all. Janice said I was overthinking things again. She has told me that a lot over the years. I know it's probably true about me, so I tried to just forget the whole thing. I went home and had a normal night. I watched television and ate some dinner, but I couldn't stop myself from looking. I looked out the window a lot. I kept checking on the new family's house. It was still dark, just a black silhouette. It had a strange, empty look. It felt like nobody even lived there. Then I saw a light flicker in the upstairs window. It only happened for a split second. A second later, it was gone again. The house went back to being dark. My stomach suddenly felt like it was in my throat. I felt a cold knot of dread. I suddenly started to feel sick. That single flicker had a lot of meaning. It felt like something was deeply wrong. I just couldn't shake the feeling at all. The next day I did something stupid. I broke the unwritten neighborhood rule. I walked over to the new house on my lunch break. I rang the doorbell once. Nobody answered at all. I rang it again and then again. Still no one came to the door. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My hands were shaking a little bit. It felt wrong to be there at all. I noticed a large stain near the front door. It was a dark reddish-brown color. The stain was almost completely faded now. It was nearly the same color as the wood itself. I thought it was just some old spilled paint. It might have been something from a moving truck. I told myself that it was probably nothing, but the shape was really strange. It didn't look like a paint spill at all. It was just a weird long smudge. It was like something had been dragged. I had a sickening feeling about it. A part of me knew what it was. I walked around to the back of the house. I had no idea why I was doing this. The yard was also eerily empty. No kids' toys, no garden hose. The blinds were all drawn shut. I saw a large, heavy-duty padlock on the shed door. That seemed really out of place to me. Most sheds just have a simple latch. This one looked like a bank vault. I saw a small shovel and a trowel nearby. They were both caked with dark, moist dirt. My mind started to put the pieces together. The feeling of dread was so strong now. I walked away and went back to my house. I felt a little sick to my stomach. I knew what I needed to do next. I needed to call my friend Dennis. Dennis is a detective with the city police department. We've known each other for years. I needed to tell him what I had seen, but then I started to have second thoughts. What if it was just paint, after all? What if I was being completely insane? I started to doubt everything I was thinking. The truth suddenly seemed too crazy to handle. I kept walking back to my house. I tried to talk myself out of it. I told myself it was just a strange looking stain. Maybe it was some kind of old sealant. The shovel was just in a weird place. Lots of people use heavy duty padlocks. I tried to make it all make sense. I called Dennis anyway. He answered and I told him the whole story. I told him about the refrigerated truck. I told him about the dark house and the faint light. Then I told him about the stain and the shovel. I was pretty frantic while I was talking. Dennis just listened quietly for a while. There was a long pause on his end. He finally spoke in a calm voice. He said I was letting my imagination get ahead of me. He asked if anyone else in the group saw anything. He asked if Carol had seen anything more. I had to admit that no one else had. I told him Carol just mentioned it, and that was it. He said he had to deal with this stuff all the time. He said people see something and then just run with it. He told me to just keep an eye out. He said to call him if anything else happened, but his tone was clearly dismissive. He was basically telling me to just stop. It was a humiliating conversation for me. I felt like a complete fool. I felt like a little old lady. I was the crazy one in the neighborhood. I felt this misplaced guilt about the whole thing. I had wasted Dennis's time. I had overstepped my bounds completely. I wanted to just let it all go now. I wanted to pretend I never saw anything. I wanted to just forget everything I had thought. I just wanted to go back to my boring life. But the image of that stain kept coming back. It was starting to feel like blood. The next few days, I tried to keep my head down. I tried to focus on my job and on my wife. I spent a lot of time with my wife, Janice. We watched our favorite shows together. We ate our normal, boring dinners. It was all a desperate attempt at normalcy. I started to think that Dennis was right about me. Maybe I was just overthinking everything, but then more things started to pop up. Things that I couldn't ignore at all. I noticed a strong, strange smell from their yard. It was a really sickly sweet kind of smell. It was hard to describe exactly what it was. The smell wasn't constant, but it was there. It was strongest in the evenings. I also saw the new family's car. It was a beat-up old Honda Civic. I saw them drive it to a different street. They would park it and get out. Then they would walk back to their house. I saw them do this several times. It was a strange, secretive routine. I also saw them bringing things into the house. It was late at night in the dark. I saw them carrying large black bags. The bags were really heavy looking. It was the same kind of bags that landscapers use, but they were carrying them at midnight. It felt so incredibly suspicious. I also saw what they did with the shovels. They took them from the shed and then used them. I watched from my upstairs window one night. They were digging in the yard. It was a deep trench. It was late and they were using flashlights. The lights were bobbing and weaving in the dark. It was a creepy, mesmerizing thing to watch. I didn't see what they put in there, but I saw them fill the trench back up. The next morning, the ground looked like it had been disturbed. There were new patches of dirt all over. I knew in my gut this wasn't about gardening. This wasn't a family who wanted a new garden. I felt the truth, but I still hadn't acted on it. The stakes were so much higher now. I felt like I was too deep to turn back. I knew I couldn't just keep ignoring it. The very next day was a Saturday. I had to do something, anything at all. My wife was out with her sisters. I put on a pair of old work gloves. I walked outside with a shovel in my hand. It was my own small, pathetic protest. I wasn't just a quiet guy anymore. I went over to their yard, to the trench they'd dug. I didn't even look around for them. I just started digging in the dirt. It was a stupid, reckless, crazy thing to do. My heart was pounding. I couldn't breathe. I was so afraid they'd see me, but I just had to know for sure. I kept digging, and the dirt was soft. The shovel went down really easy. I got about a foot down into the ground. Then my shovel hit something solid. It felt like something wrapped in plastic. I got down on my hands and knees. I used my hands to feel around it. I felt the shape of a human head. It was wrapped in heavy plastic sheeting. The plastic was taped up with duct tape. I felt the shape of a shoulder below that. My stomach did a complete flip. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. I knew it wasn't a garden statue. I started to dig like a madman now. I didn't care who saw me. I had to know for sure. I had to see what was there. I pulled away a piece of the black plastic. I saw the back of a woman's head. Her hair was blonde and a little bit tangled. I had never seen her before. It wasn't a neighbor, that's for sure. I dropped my shovel and just sat there. I didn't know what to do next. I just sat in the dirt, staring at the plastic. It was a definitive act of courage. I had pushed the situation to the edge. There was no more denying the truth now. My whole world just completely shifted. My quiet life was just completely gone. I finally knew what had been happening. A chill went through me, and I just sat there. I sat there in the dirt for a long time. I was just completely numb inside. My brain just kept replaying the scene, the look of the plastic and the tangled hair. It all felt like a bad dream. I heard a car door slam a few houses down. It snapped me back to reality. I quickly stood up and started to fill the hole back in. I covered the plastic and tamped down the dirt. My hands were shaking the entire time. I ran back to my own yard. I cleaned the shovel off with my hose. I scrubbed the last of the wet dirt from it. I felt this intense need to hide everything. I couldn't leave any evidence behind. I had to act like I was never there. I didn't know who to trust now. I called Dennis again, but he didn't answer. I left him a frantic message this time. I told him what I had found. I told him I knew something was wrong, but I didn't hear back from him. I called my wife, Janice, at her sister's house. She could hear the panic in my voice. I started to tell her what I had done. I told her about digging in the yard. I told her about what the shovel had hit. She just listened to me in silence. I could hear her breathing on the phone. Then she finally said something to me. She told me I had gone crazy. She said I was inventing all this. She said I needed to get help. Janice told me to stop bothering Dennis. She said she was not coming home until I calmed down. She told me to just sit there and think. She said I needed to think about what I was doing. Her words were so cold and so distant. It was like I was a complete stranger to her. I felt completely isolated now. My world had just completely shifted. My wife's reaction was shocking. I didn't think she would react that way. I thought she would just believe me, but she made it clear she didn't. I didn't just sit there like Janice told me to do. I couldn't just be a good boy and wait. My mind was racing now. My wife had dismissed me and Dennis hadn't called back. I was completely on my own. It was a strange kind of freedom. I felt this surge of cold determination. It wasn't about being the good guy anymore. It was about taking back some power. It was about making them pay for this. I grabbed my car keys and left the house. I had no idea where I was going. My car just felt like a safe place. I drove around for a little while. I drove past the houses of my neighbors. They were all going about their normal lives. They were all completely unaware of this. I felt a bitter, ugly kind of resentment. I felt angry at them for being so blind. Then I decided to do something. I pulled up in front of the new family's house. I sat there in my car and I waited. I watched as they both came out. They got into their beat-up old Honda Civic. They drove off in the opposite direction. I started my car and followed them. I kept a good distance behind them. I saw them get to the other street. They parked the car and got out. They started walking back towards their house. I pulled my car over and sat there. I watched them walk away from me. This was my window of opportunity. I had a phone in my hand now. I had the number for the police. I didn't call Dennis this time. I called the main police dispatch. I told them there was a suspicious vehicle. I gave them the address for the car. I told them to investigate the car. I told them it was a strange situation. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for a response. I just drove away, back to my house. I didn't go back and talk to Janice. I just sat in the dark living room. I didn't want any more peace. I just wanted some kind of justice. I didn't just drive back to my house. I drove back to the street with the Honda. I wanted to see what the police would do. I parked on a side street and just watched. The police car arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers got out of the car. They were both in their uniforms. I felt a surge of adrenaline in my veins. This was really happening now. They walked around the car once. They looked in the windows with their flashlights. They pulled out some kind of device. They ran it over the car doors and the hood. They opened the trunk and looked inside. Then they just closed it all up again. One of the officers wrote something down. The other one just stood there. They got back in their car and drove off. That was it. The end of the line. I felt a wave of crushing disappointment. It was a stupid, empty anticlimax. I drove back to my dark house. I sat there in the living room for a while. I kept trying to think about what to do. The police had completely blown me off. Dennis had completely blown me off. Janice had completely blown me off. I felt so alone in this whole thing. I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't about being smart anymore. It was about just being persistent. It was about making them finally listen. I grabbed my keys and went outside. I went back to the new family's house. I went to the yard, to the trench. I started to dig again. My hands were already blistered. I didn't care about the pain. I just dug and dug. I had to know for sure. My shovel hit the plastic again. I tore at the plastic with my hands. I saw the back of the woman's head again, but this time I also saw something else. I saw the shape of a second body below her. My mind couldn't even process it all. The stakes had just multiplied now. I was in too deep to ever turn back. I was fully committed to this. My heart was pounding like a drum. I didn't just stand there staring at the bodies. I knew what I had to do now. I was going to force the issue. I wasn't going to wait for the police. I wasn't going to wait for Dennis. I wasn't going to call Janice. This was my problem now. My hands were covered in dirt, and I was tired. I got up and left the yard. I walked back over to my own house. I didn't turn on any of the lights. I walked through the dark living room. I felt my way to the bedroom. I grabbed my phone and my car keys. I didn't think about what I was doing. I was just running on pure instinct. I got in my car and I drove off. I drove back over to the other street. I parked on the side street again. I saw that their Honda was still there. I saw the front door of their house was open. I knew they were probably just inside. I wasn't going to wait this time. I walked right up to their front door. The door was unlocked and I just walked in. The house was completely dark inside. I could hear their voices from a different room. They were talking about their day. They had no idea I was even there. I walked down the hall to the living room. They were both sitting on the couch. I saw the man and the woman from their car. They looked up at me from the couch. Their faces were both pale and frozen. I just looked at them for a long moment. I didn't say a single word. Then I just turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door or make a sound. I just walked back to my car. I got in and I drove off. I didn't call anyone this time. I just drove to the police station. I went to the main desk and I just stood there. I didn't say a single word. I didn't have to do anything else. The dirt on my hands told the story. I stood at the police station front desk. I just watched the officer there. He saw the look on my face and he saw my hands. He saw the dark, wet dirt under my fingernails. He looked at me with a lot of questions. I knew I didn't have to answer them. He just picked up his phone. He made a quiet call to someone. I could hear his low voice on the phone. I heard him say my address. I heard him say a name I knew, Dennis. He just pointed to a chair and I sat down. I waited there for a long time. I was just completely empty now. I had nothing left in me. I felt the silence and the distance. There were no lessons to be learned here. There was no comfort to be found at all. My life as I knew it was over. I was a different person entirely now. I was no longer the quiet Frank from the permit office. I was no longer the guy on the neighborhood watch. The quiet street and the lemon bars were gone. I had dug up a brutal truth. Now I just had to live with it. I just sat there in the silence. It was all that was left. My wife was not coming home. My friend Dennis was not my friend anymore. I was alone in this with my brutal truth. I just sat there and looked at my hands. They were the only proof I had. I saw the dirt and I smelled the dirt. It smelled like the earth itself. It smelled like the end of everything. I just waited for the silence to stop, but I knew it wouldn't. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.